No human had ever been allowed inside the crystal hall of Aralion. The hall was not built with walls alone. It was made of light, memory, and silence. Tall crystal pillars floated without support, glowing softly like frozen lightning. The air itself felt alive, as if it watched every breath, and in the center of it all stood a human, Elias Ward. He looked small there. His clothes were simple, worn from long travel. His hands carried scars from battles no history book would remember. His heart beat fast, but he did not bow. Around him sat the galactic council beings of many shapes and colors, eyes sharp with judgment. To them, humans were nothing special, short-lived, emotional, weak. Elias had heard those words his whole life. At the far end of the hall hovered Princess Salith of Aureli. She did not stand on the floor. She floated gently above it, as if gravity itself respected her. Her skin shimmered like silver mixed with starlight. Her eyes were deep, violet, ancient, and calm, yet filled with something unreadable. She had lived for centuries. She had seen stars born and die, and yet she was watching a human. The silence stretched until it became heavy. Finally, Salith spoke. "Human Elias Ward," she said, her voice soft but clear, echoing through every crystal. "You were brought here not as a prisoner, and not as an ally." Elias swallowed. His mouth was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Then why am I here, Princess?" A few council members shifted. Humans were not supposed to speak unless ordered. Salith raised one glowing hand, and the room went still again. "You are here," she said, "because your species claims something that no other species dares to claim." Her eyes met his. "You claim that love is stronger than power." Elias felt his chest tighten. Love, that word had followed him through war and loss, through fire and screams, through nights where survival felt like a punishment. The princess slowly descended, her feet finally touching the crystal floor. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. "Tell me," she continued, "now closer, what would you sacrifice for it?" The question struck him harder than any weapon. Elias did not answer at once. Images flooded his mind, Earth under alien attack, cities burning, the sky filled with ships that did not care who lived or died. He saw his sister, Agenlinus, smiling at him, then bleeding, then gone. He remembered choosing to pull a stranger from rubble instead of running. Remembered staying behind so others could escape. Remembered pain, fear, and loss. He lifted his eyes slowly. Around him, the council waited. Some were curious, some amused, some already dismissing him. Salith waited too, but her face held no judgment. Only attention. Elias took a breath. "Everything," he said. The word was quiet, but it shattered the hall. A sharp wave of energy rippled through the crystals. The floating lights flickered. Council members gasped. Some rose from their seats in shock. Salith froze. For a moment, time itself seemed unsure what to do. "Everything," she repeated, softer now. "Yes," Elias said. His voice trembled, but he did not look away. Not because it is easy, not because it is noble, but because without love, surviving means nothing. The room felt different. Salith's glow dimmed, then slowly grew brighter, warmer. Something ancient inside her stirred. Something she had not felt since before memory. Pain, longing, hope. The prophecy whispered through her mind. Words she had always believed were only stories. an outsider heart will remind us who we were. The council erupted in voices. This is madness. Emotion is a flaw. A human cannot be trusted. But Salith heard none of them. She was still looking at Elias. At the human who answered without hesitation. At the one being in the hall who spoke not of power, but of meaning. She raised her hand again, silencing the council with ease. The session is ended, she declared. Gasps echoed. As guards moved forward. Elias expected to be taken away. Instead, Salif turned to him and spoke words no one expected. Human Elias Ward, she said quietly. You will remain on Aurelian. Elisa's eyes widened. Because, she added, her voice almost a whisper now, meant only for him. I wish to understand the price you are so willing to pay. And in that moment, beneath crystal and starlight, the fate of two worlds quietly changed. The decision shocked the entire Galactic Council. A human was allowed to remain on Aurelia, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as a guest of the princess herself. No one could remember such a thing ever happening before. Elias Ward was given a small chamber near the inner gardens of the Crystal Palace. The walls were made of living crystal that changed color with emotion. When Elias first entered, the walls glowed pale blue. Sensing his fear and confusion, he sat on the edge of the bed and pressed his hands together. Why me? He wondered. On Earth, he had been a soldier, one of millions. Nothing special. Yet here, among beings older and wiser than humanity, he felt like a fragile mistake. Princess Salith watched him from afar through the palace sensors. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more. But each time Elias spoke, each time his heart reacted before his logic, something inside her stirred uncomfortably. Aurelians were not meant to feel that way. Long ago, emotion had been slowly removed from their culture. It was believed to bring war, chaos, and pain. Logic and calm had made their empire powerful, but also hollow. Now their cities were silent, children were rare, joy was studied like an ancient language, not lived. Salith carried that truth like a weight. As ruler, she was responsible for the fading of her people. That night, she visited the inner gardens. Elias was there, standing near a pool of glowing water. Floating plants lit the air like stars. He looked small beneath the open crystal dome. Staring up at the sky, "You cannot sleep," Salith said gently. Elias turned fast, then relaxed when he saw her. "I'm not used to silence like this," he admitted. "It's heavy." She stepped closer. The plants responded, glowing brighter. "On Aurelian silence is peace," she said. He shook his head slowly. "For humans, silence usually means something is wrong." The words struck her harder than she expected. They walked together through the garden. Salith asked him about Earth, not about its technology or armies, but about its people. Elias told her about music played in ruined cities, about jokes shared in shelters during bombings, about holding hands with strangers because fear was easier to face together. As he spoke, his voice cracked. "I lost my sister," he said quietly. "She died protecting a child she didn't know." Salith stopped walking. "Why?" she asked. "Why would she do that?" Elias looked confused. "Because the child mattered." That answer stayed with her long after the night ended. Days passed. Salith invited Elias to walk with her, to observe council sessions, to speak freely. The elders disliked it. They warned her again and again. Humans infect logic with emotion, they said. you risk your throne. But Salith noticed changes. When Elias laughed, palace lights shimmered warmer. When he cried, servants paused, unsure why their chests felt tight. Something was spreading, not illness, but memory. The ancient prophecy returned to her thoughts. When logic builds a cage too strong, an outsider heart will break it open. Still, fear grew. What if she was wrong? One evening, Salith finally asked the question burning inside her. Ilias, she said as they watched twin suns set, do humans fear loss more than death? He thought carefully. Yes, he answered, because loss reminds us that what we had mattered. Salith closed her eyes, for the first time in centuries. Tears formed but did not fall. That night, the council met in secret. They decided the human must be removed. Emotion was awakening, and to them, that was the greatest danger of all. Far away, Ilias slept peacefully, unaware that simply by being human, he had already begun to change an empire. And Princess Salith stood alone at the window, realizing a terrible truth: if she protected him, she would risk everything if she lost him. She feared she would lose herself. The next morning, chaos came quietly. The Galactic Council had sent their envoys. Tall, angular beings with silver skin and eyes like molten metal arrived at the palace gates. Their message was clear: the human must leave. Immediately, Princess Salith met them in the great hall. Her presence was calm, but her heart raced. This human has done nothing wrong, she said. He stays. The envoys tilted their heads in disbelief. Your Highness, one said, his voice like grinding steel, humans bring only instability. They are emotional, fragile, and dangerous. By keeping him, you endanger the empire. Salith's hands clenched. For centuries, she had ruled with logic. She had followed law and prophecy, carefully balancing power and peace. But now, her chest ached with something older, something unfamiliar. I am aware of the risks, she replied, and I accept them. The envoy's eyes narrowed. Then you are defying the council. That choice carries consequences. Salith did not answer. She turned and floated toward the inner gardens. Her feet brushed the crystal floor lightly, leaving shimmering traces behind her. There, Elias waited, unaware that the council had already planned his removal. He noticed the tension immediately. Princess, he asked softly, is something wrong? She shook her head, trying to hide the fear in her eyes. Nothing you need to worry about. Just sit with me. They walked among the glowing plants. The twin suns were rising, spilling gold across the crystal surfaces. Elias felt the warmth, but he also felt the weight of the empire pressing down on them. Why are they so afraid of me? He asked quietly. Salith stopped and looked at him. Because you remind them of what they have lost. He frowned. I don't understand. They have forgotten how to feel, she said. To love, to hope, to care. And you awaken that memory. That is dangerous to those who value control above all else. Elias's chest tightened. So, just by existing, I'm a threat. Yes, Salith admitted. And by staying, I become one too. Fear rose in Elias, but beneath it was a stubborn flame. Humans survived impossible odds. They endured pain and loss and kept moving forward. I don't want anyone to get hurt because of me, he said. If leaving keeps you safe, I will go. Salith's hands shook as she reached for his. Her fingers brushed his palm, and for the first time, the world outside the garden seemed to vanish. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If you leave, everything I have felt, everything I am starting to feel, it will die. I cannot let that happen. Not now." The palace alarms suddenly rang. Council guards had entered the garden. They moved toward Elias with weapons that glimmered with energy. Elias didn't run. He stood his ground, ready to face them. He had faced worse on Earth. Pain, blood, death. He knew how to survive. Princess Salith stepped in front of him, her aura flaring with light. "You will not touch him," she commanded. The energy around her grew, crackling like a storm contained in a crystal. The council's envoys hesitated, their confidence faltering. A princess refusing their orders was unheard of. And yet, here she stood against centuries of law and logic protecting a human. Elias looked at her, feeling a surge of something he had not expected: awe, fear, and warmth. I don't want to cause you trouble," he said. "You've already changed everything," Salith replied, "and I will not let you be taken. Not by them. Not by anyone." A silence fell, heavy and electric. For a moment, neither side moved. The garden lights reflected in Ilias's eyes, shimmering like tiny galaxies. He realized then something profound. He was human, yes, fragile. Yes, but he also had something no Aurelian had felt in centuries: courage driven by love. And that courage could defy an empire. The council soldiers eventually retreated, but the tension did not fade. Salith and Elias stood in the glowing garden, knowing that the cost of this human heart could be more than either of them could bear. Yet neither stepped back, because love, once awakened, demanded courage beyond fear. And in that quiet garden, with sunlight spilling across crystal and water, Elias and Salith understood something powerful. To protect what you love is the greatest risk and the greatest strength of all. The Empire was watching, but for the first time, a human and an alien princess were no longer afraid to stand together. The first attack came without warning, late at night. When the palace lights glimmered softly and the crystal halls were calm, the council struck. Ships unlike anything Elias had seen descended from the skies. Their surfaces were dark, jagged, and alive, pulsing with energy like wounded beasts. Inside, soldiers moved with mechanical precision, ready to capture the human who had dared to challenge their empire. Elias awoke to the sound of alarms. The crystal walls vibrated with warning signals, sending small fractures of light across the floors. He grabbed the small blaster he carried for emergencies, though it was weak compared to Aurelian technology. His heart pounded not with fear, but with focus. He ran to the garden where Salith waited. Her hands were glowing, forming protective barriers around the courtyard. "They are here," she shouted, her voice carrying a mixture of fear and determination. Elias nodded. "I know." He didn't hesitate. He ran forward, chest tight, blood pumping. Every soldier that came near him met resistance, not because he was strong, but because he refused to fall. Every move he made was driven by survival, by instinct, and by love. Humans had always survived impossible odds, and now he would prove it again. The first soldier lunged. Elias ducked and struck with a metal rod he had found. The soldier stumbled, shocked by his determination. Another came, this one faster, stronger. Elias sidestepped, grabbed a falling energy blade, and swung not with skill, but with heart. Every blow carried the weight of everything he had lost, everything he hoped to protect. Princess Salith watched, astonished. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile. Yet here was one man, facing dozens, refusing to fall. His courage was blinding. It illuminated the garden more than her magic ever could. "Elias," she shouted, "don't get hurt. I will protect you." He yelled back, "I can't let them take you." Time slowed for a moment as he moved through the soldiers. He was bleeding, bruised, and exhausted, but he did not stop. He fought like humans had always fought against impossible odds, fueled by love, hope, and sheer will, that one of the council commanders finally approached, his armor shining like liquid metal. "Human," he said, voice cold and flat. "Surrender now. You cannot win." Elias looked up, blood streaming down his face, chest heaving. His eyes met the commander's without fear. "I don't win," he said softly. "I survive. And I protect what matters." With that, he charged. Each step, each strike was chaotic but effective. His enemies fell, stunned by the force of his will. The courtyard became a blur of light and motion, and yet, through it all, Elias remained standing, refusing to give in. Princess Salith realized something the council had never understood. Humans were fragile, yes, but their hearts were not. Their courage, their ability to endure suffering, to keep moving forward when everything seemed lost. It was unstoppable. The tide of the battle began to turn. Aurelian guards, inspired by Elias's bravery, joined in. They were powerful, but they had been hesitant before. Now they fought with renewed energy, standing alongside the human who refused to break when the last council soldier fell. Elias dropped to his knees, exhausted and bleeding. Salith ran to him, her hands glowing as she healed his wounds. He smiled faintly, the fire in his eyes still burning. You fought for me," she whispered, disbelief and awe in her voice. "I fought for us," he said, coughing slightly. "For you, for everything we could be together." Tears welled in her eyes. For centuries, she had ruled with logic and control. She had never known fear or love like this. And now she understood the truth that humans carried in their hearts. Strength is not just in power, it is in the will to protect what you love. That night, the palace was quiet again. The attackers were gone, but the echoes of Ilias's courage remained. The Aurelian people would speak of this day for centuries, and Salith knew one thing clearly: this human, small and fragile as he seemed, had changed everything, because humans, she realized, could do what Aurelians had long forgotten. They could fight when hope seemed gone. They could stand, even when the world told them to fall, and in that courage there was something beautiful, something worth protecting. Elias looked at her, weak but smiling. "We survived," he whispered. "Yes," she replied, holding his hand. "And now, we will make sure we thrive." For the first time, Aurelian began to feel alive again, and it all started with a human heart that refused to give up. The aftermath of the battle left the Crystal Palace scarred. Broken light shards floated in the air, and the soft hum of the walls was uneven, like the heartbeat of a wounded giant. Elias sat on the palace steps, his body bruised, his chest still aching, yet his eyes were alive with fire. Princess Salith stood beside him, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the destruction. "This was only the beginning," she said quietly. Her voice trembled, but there was determination beneath it. "The council will not stop. They will strike again, and worse than before." Elias nodded, knowing she was right. Humans had faced countless impossible odds on Earth, but the Aurelian Empire was vast, and their enemies did not forgive Isaac. Yet he felt no fear, not for himself, only for her. Salith looked at him, her violet eyes soft but troubled. Elias, I am not like you. I cannot sacrifice without cost. If I continue to protect you, I risk everything, the Empire, my people, even my life. Elias took her hand gently. Then we face it together. I am not afraid if you are beside me. Her chest tightened. That was the problem. For centuries, she had been trained to rule with logic and reason. Emotion was dangerous, unpredictable. But now, that same emotion, love, care, hope had taken root in her heart. She could not ignore it. Days passed, and the council grew more aggressive. They sent envoys, demands, and finally, threats. Salith realized the truth she had been avoiding. To save her people, she would have to make the ultimate choice. The power that sustained the empire, the very life force of Aurelian, required a ruler who placed the empire above personal attachment. If she wanted to protect Elias, to let love remain alive in her heart, she would have to give up her immortality, the very essence of her being, that night. She found Elias alone in the inner gardens, gazing at the twin moons that reflected on the glowing pools. He looked calm, unaware of the depth of her dilemma. Elias, she began softly, her voice trembling, there is something you do not know, something I must decide. He turned to her, concern clouding his expression. What is it? She took a deep breath. The power that keeps Aurelian alive. It requires a ruler who serves the empire first, who sacrifices their heart, their attachments. If I continue to protect you, if I continue to love, I will lose that power. The empire could fall. Ilios's hand gripped hers. Then we save the empire together, he said, firm. I've fought for countless lives on Earth. I know how to survive, and I know how to fight for something worth saving. We can do this, princess. You are not alone. Tears filled Salith's eyes. She had never heard words so simple yet so powerful. Humans spoke with honesty that cut through centuries of protocol and duty. In that moment, she realized why the prophecy had chosen him not for his strength, but for his heart. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice. To protect the empire, she could never love again. To love Elias, she could let go of the very power that had defined her for centuries. Finally, she opened her eyes and looked at him. Then I choose. Love, I choose you. I will step down as ruler. I will give up my immortality. Elias stared at her, stunned. Sailor, you don't have to do that. We can find another way. She shook her head. No. The empire will survive because of its people, not because of my control. And you showed me what it means to feel, what it means to care. That is worth more than power. Elias pulled her into his arms, feeling the warmth of her, the weight of her choice, and the vulnerability in both of them. They held each other, two hearts beating together, knowing that the cost of love was immense, but also knowing that some things were worth any price. The empire's lights seemed brighter that night, as if the crystals themselves were celebrating her decision. For the first time in centuries, Aurelian would be led not by fear or cold logic, but by hope, by care, and by the reminder that even the smallest heart, human or alien, could change the course of worlds. Salith whispered into his ear, trembling, "You've awakened me. Elias, because of you, I can feel again, and I will cherish it. Every moment." Elias smiled, tired but alive. "Then we fight for every moment together, and in that embrace, two hearts, one human, one immortal, no longer decided to face the galaxy together, knowing that the greatest battles were not always fought with weapons, but with courage, sacrifice, and love. The Crystal Palace had changed. Not in structure, its walls still glowed with shifting light, and the gardens still floated with luminescent plants, but in spirit. Where once silence and order had ruled, laughter, conversation, and small acts of care now flowed like a gentle river. And at the heart of it all were Princess Salith and Elias Ward. Salith had given up her immortality to protect her heart, her love, and her people. The council had initially protested, calling her decision reckless, foolish, even dangerous. But they could not deny what Elias had taught them, that courage, determination, and love were powers far beyond any weapon. Humans, with all their fragility, had a strength the galaxy had forgotten. Elias walked beside her through the palace halls, his hand wrapped around hers. He was still recovering from the injuries of battle, his face marked with scars, but there was a quiet pride in his eyes. Wherever he went, Aurelians paused and stared, not with derision, but with awe. This human had faced the impossible, yet he had stood tall, unyielding. He had survived not because he was the strongest, but because he refused to surrender, because he fought for something greater than himself. Salith guided the council through the gardens one morning. They were hesitant, stiff, unsure of how to respond to her newfound approach. Yet, as they watched Elias kneeling beside a wounded servant, offering comfort with words and touch, something inside them shifted. Their eyes softened, their rigid expressions loosened. They began to remember. That feeling mattered. Across the empire, the ripples spread. Leaders from other planets came to Aurelian, curious about the human who had changed the princess. At first, they dismissed him as a novelty, but when they witnessed his courage, his willingness to risk everything for love, they began to reconsider their assumptions. A species once deemed weak became a symbol of hope, endurance, and the power of the human heart. The children of Aurelian, long isolated and few in number, began to smile more freely. They laughed in the gardens as Elias told them stories of earth-fall fireflies, of rain-soaked streets, of songs that could make even the hardest heart ache with joy. Salith watched him, sometimes laughing, sometimes holding back tears. She realized that in sharing these simple, human moments, Elias was teaching her people how to live again. Even the palace walls seemed to respond. Crystals pulsed with warmth when Elias entered a room, and pools of water shimmered brighter when laughter echoed nearby. Salith often caught herself staring at him, amazed not just by what he had done in battle, but by how he had awakened an entire empire to feeling. One night, she found him alone by the reflecting pools. The twin moons shone overhead, mirrored in the still water. "You've changed everything," she whispered, walking beside him. He smiled, his expression quiet but proud. "No," he said softly, "you changed. I just reminded you how to feel." She shook her head, tears glistening. "It's more than that. You have given hope to an entire people. You've reminded us that life is not just survival, but love, connection, and care. I don't think we've seen anyone like you in centuries. Elias chuckled faintly. Humans aren't perfect. We break, we fail, we cry, but we try again. That's what makes us, us. That's what makes life worth living. Salith reached out and held his hand, feeling the warmth, the pulse, the unyielding strength of him. Then we will keep trying, together, she said. And maybe the galaxy will learn too. It began slowly. Other worlds started sending emissaries to Aurelian, not to demand tribute or obey laws, but to learn, to observe, to understand. They asked about humans, about Elias, about how a single human heart could ignite change across 1,000 worlds. Elias never boasted. He simply lived, simply acted, simply cared. And in doing so, he proved the lessons Salith had known but could not articulate for centuries. Strength was not measured in ships, weapons, or immortal life. Strength was measured in courage, in sacrifice, in the willingness to love even when loss was certain. For the first time in centuries, Aurelian was alive. Its people smiled. Its children laughed. Its leaders questioned old rules. And in every corner of the empire, the story of a human who refused to break, and a princess who dared to love, became a legend that would be remembered for generations. That night, Salith stood beside Elias, gazing at the twin moons once more. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling his steady heartbeat, feeling the warmth of life and hope surrounding them. "You've done more than survive," she whispered. "You've taught us to live." Elias kissed her hand gently. "No," he said softly. "We've done it together. And now, maybe the galaxy can remember what it means to feel too." And as they stood there, the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself recognized the awakening of something new, something unstoppable, something human.